Alrighty, everybody. Here's another spooky Halloween show from Billy Bedlam 66. Now, this one, this has been going on for a couple of years now, and this has really got people kind of freaked out. They're not really sure what's going on. Definitely got a lot of mystery to it. So let me go over this real quick here. This is from the London Guardian, and it says, man dies on Aer Lingus flight after being restrained. Plane from Lisbon diverted to Cork after passenger reportedly becomes agitated and bites another man and then was restrained. A man has died on board Aer Lingus flight from Lisbon to Dublin after reportedly being restrained when he became agitated and bit a man, Irish police say. Officers were investigating after the flight was diverted to Cork when the captain declared an emergency. The man became unwell and fell unconscious after being restrained on Sunday night's flight, not knowing exactly when he died. But he was pronounced dead at the scene, and he was alone on the flight, according to everyone on the flight and the airline. There was 170 passengers and crew, and they were being questioned after this event. This is a very strange story. It's happened before. We have seen this. Excuse me. We've seen this before. The man in Miami, Florida, that was crawling on the ground and bit that guy. He crawled out of like an alley or something. They attributed it to a new synthetic drug that made people like go insane and want to like bite people and stuff. That is spooky, very spooky. I mean, I don't know how you get around that. That is just plain spooky. Really weird. They arrested a Portuguese woman for drug possession, for intent to distribute and all that kind of stuff. That's a little sideline to the article over this deal. It's possible that she had this new designer drug and had given it to him. It's also possible that he was a mule for her and that he had swallowed this drug. You know, they put them in balloons and then they have the people swallow them. And it's possible that what happened was that the balloon, if that's what happened, that they know the balloons come apart, or the bags or whatever they put them in come apart in the stomach and then they OD. But yeah, that was really, really spooky. And this has happened before. We've seen this deal in Miami where this guy did this. Let me see if I can find something else here. Zombie-like people. And so we kind of got this this whole like zombie thing. Let's take a look at this here. We have the BBC has a story on this. Okay. And they're talking about this. They interviewed a doctor from the University of London, and he said at first this disease causes headaches, aching muscles, and maybe itching. But in the late stages, when the parasites have invaded the brain, the signs become more obvious and ominous. Victims find it hard to concentrate, they become irritable, their speech is slurred, and they stop eating. Their daily rhythm becomes disrupted to such an extent they can't sleep at night and find it almost impossible to stay awake during the day. It even becomes very hard for them to do simple mental tasks, such as drawing a straight line. Geez, they've just described most of the symptoms that I have right now. He said this infection carries nightmarish qualities, reducing many of its victims to a zombie-like state before they go into a coma and die. Those who do survive can be left with irreparable brain damage. He says there are no vaccines and no preventive medicines, and you can be reinfected providing you survive the first bout. He did call it a sleeping sickness, and he says this kills about 50,000 people worldwide. he says right now, he says 60 million people are living under the threat of getting sleeping sickness, but only 1 in 20 of them have access to even basic medical facilities, which means this is probably a disease that usually hits third world countries. He says there are tests used to diagnose and the drugs used to treat the disease were decades old and lacking. Melosporol, which has been around for half a century, contains arsenic and kills at least 5% of the patients who take it. I think he's saying that that drug was probably being used for that. The parasite that causes sleeping sickness, called Trypanosoma brucell and carries by Tsetse flies, is also learning how to become resistant to the available drugs, making the discovery of new treatments a necessity. So that's kind of a thing there where, you know, it's obvious that we're kind of getting a feeling or an idea of something that comes close to a zombie-like state. And it's hard to say for sure, you know, what could be doing this and what could actually create this type of thing. Here's another one. Let's see what these guys are talking about here. This is IO9. I've seen this website before. I'm not sure who or what it is. 5 real diseases that could make you act like a zombie. So that's pretty interesting. They go through and they talk about zombie films, you know, like The Walking Dead and all that. They talk about the sleeping sickness that I just mentioned from the BBC article. Rabies. Now that's the one I forgot about, but somebody told me about that rabies kind of mimics a zombie-like behavior. So that's kind of interesting too. Yeah, that's woo. Yeah, that can get spooky. Now think about this for a moment. You know, movies like these zombie movies, how much of those movies actually mimic real diseases? The people that are in them that bite people, go bananas, whatever, how much of that really is for real? How much of that is real and how much of it is just Hollywood? You know, Hollywood a lot of times takes from real life. And so here under the rabies column, they're saying there isn't a disease, be it mental or psychological, that makes people want to eat other people, at least none as currently recognized by medical science. And then they have in parentheses, cannibalism isn't considered a mental illness in its own right, but rather as part of a larger web of psychoses. And it's like, well, I would consider that mental illness. He says there, right here, there are certain cultural specific mental conditions when psychosis observed in certain Native American peoples is one of the better examples that makes people think they're turning into cannibals. That's about it. But he still says rabies under certain conditions approximates some of the conditions of zombie lust for brains. The rabies virus causes massive inflammation or swelling in the brain, and it's most often transmitted from bites from infected animals. About 55,000 people die annually from rabies. Although vaccines do exist, they have to be administered before the onset of symptoms that the patient is to survive. Again, the symptoms of rabies sound rather like those of The Walking Dead: full or partial paralysis, mental impairment, agitation and strange behavior, mania, and finally delirium. Okay, so that's really weird. And then there's necrosis. They're saying it really isn't technically a disease, obviously not, because necrosis happens in death. Actually, it is death. It's rather a condition with a lot of different possible causes: cancer, poison, injury, and infection. Causes premature cell death. He says, the guy who wrote the article says, we're going to be super literal about what the Walking Dead are, then the patient with necrotic tissues may be the closest equivalent. After all, a patient suffering from necrosis technically is partially dead, albeit still very much alive in the important areas: the brain, the heart, and the rest of the vital organs. Okay. Okay. So let's go on to the next one, Dysarthria. Um, uh, and they go into this one. And this one is, they talk about the innocuous, like the iconic moans and grunts of oncoming zombie horde. What causes that? And they're saying one possibility is dysarthria, which is a disorder affecting the motor controls of human speech. It is particularly appropriate because it's neurological in its origins, which ties in with the brain-based aspects of zombie lore. There are a lot of different causes of dysarthric speech, but all are characterized by malfunction in the nervous system that makes it difficult to control the tongue, lips, throat, or lungs. That's interesting. Then there's the famous one, leprosy. Wow, look at this. Cases of leprosy have been reported going back some 4,000 years. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, and that kind of, the rotting flesh and decaying body parts could be like what you see in zombies, and that's leprosy. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's pretty much it. That's, so that, that's kind of a odd doodad there. I mean, how do you explain something like that? That's really, really weird. So, yeah, so that's what we're dealing with zombies. Now, if you've looked at my other shows, I have a show on there that goes into a small town called Django in Texas. It's a fictional town. It's not real. And basically, I kind of hint at zombies. I don't really come right out and say zombies. But I talk about people acting strange and everything like that. I've only done like 2 or 3 episodes. I got to do some more shows. But you get the idea about zombies, what is potentially going on here, and what is happening. And it's a pretty spooky thing, to say the least. I mean, there's no doubt that this thing is really weird. So anyways, I think we're going to leave it right there, because I got some other stuff I need to do, including a show for YouTube, a bigger show. So anyways, thank you for tuning in, and this is Billy Bedlam 66 signing off.